Hello and welcome back to my channel. For a while now I've been wanting to do a video where I talk about my book blanket because I talked about it in the first video that I made for this year where I talked about all my favorite books from 2024, and in that video I talked about wanting to make a book blanket for this year, and I have been working on that. It's been a lot of fun, and I've also been working on another book blanket from 2024. Right at the end of 2024, I saw this idea for a book blanket. Reading and crocheting are my two favorite hobbies, and to put them together like that just sounded so fun. But the idea that I saw did have granny squares, and at the time I had no idea how to do granny squares, and the problem was I had no idea how to do a magic circle. I still don't know how to do a magic circle, but I did figure out that you can chain 4 and then attach them to each other, and then you can crochet inside of that circle, and it works just as fine, and you won't lose your stitches that way. So that is what I have been doing, and it has been a game changer. Since the beginning of the year, I have been working on these little granny squares that look like the covers of my books, and I have made a lot of these things. So I am a little bit behind, so I thought it would be fun to crochet some of these and let you see how I do it. But sometimes I don't have any squares to crochet because I'm all caught up, but I still love crocheting, and so I'm also at the same time working on my 2024 book blanket. I started this blanket with rows because at the time, like I said, I did not know how to do granny squares, and so it has taken me a long time, but it is starting to come together, and I am almost done with it actually. When I first did it, I started doing this stitch, and I don't know what the stitch is called, but it's like this wavy, like really cool stitch. But whenever I made it, I did not realize how the width of it would be, and as you can see, like this barely even covers me like this way, and so that is not a very comfy blanket, but it is this long. I still had a lot more books left whenever I got to this point. I didn't want a blanket that was going to be very short width-wise but very long lengthwise, and so I decided to crochet 2 different blankets and then crochet those 2 blankets together widthwise instead of lengthwise. With this blanket, I started from the bottom of my 2024 read, so as you can see at the bottom of my blanket, there's a lot of like blues and reds and greens for all of my Christmas reads that I read in December. I think I'm going to do a border around both of them first, and then I'm going to stitch them together this way after they are bordered. That way you can still tell the difference between them, but that way it'll be a little bit bigger width-wise. As you can see now, I can be fully covered with my blanket whenever they will be stitched together like this. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I'm really excited about this. I love crocheting, and I'm so excited to have a blanket that is showing my love for reading. Okay, that is enough about 2024's book blanket. I'm now going to show you some squares from 2025 this year. Basically what I do is I just get a square and I crochet it based on the cover of the book. Let me just show you a few of my favorite ones. I love this one. It's a Christmas one actually. This one's from A Baxter Family Christmas, and it's one of my favorites. This one, it's from The Frozen River. I actually own that book, so let me show you this one with its actual book. So here is the book cover, and then I did the best I could to mimic the cover with the square. So I hope you can see how it looks like it, kind of. Eventually I'm going to put all of these squares together and form a blanket. I'm not sure how many books I'm going to read this year, and I don't want to get ahead of myself and start putting it together and then read way more books than I thought I was going to, or way less books than I thought I was going to, and the blanket end up being misproportioned. I do not want that to happen, so I'm going to wait until the end of the year to put all of these together. I have a feeling I'm going to regret that later on, but at the same time, I feel like that's the only way I can do it since I have no idea how many books I'm going to read. So now that I did all of my talking about my blankets, I hope I didn't miss anything. I'm going to go ahead and crochet a little bit. I think right now I'm going to catch up on my 2025 book blanket. I'm 4 books behind on my 2025 blanket, which really isn't that bad. With my book blanket, I forgot to say this, I am bordering each book with the black because I think whenever I sew them all together, it's just going to look a lot more seamless. So I actually decided to just buy a whole bunch of yarn. I saw this thing on Amazon. I think it was only $30 for like a yarn kit set, and it had a bunch of yarn. I honestly would not recommend this because this yarn is really small. Here is the package that it's all in, and then it has a bunch of yarn. This is what it looks like. This one I never used. It's acrylic yarn and it's pretty small in size, but I mean, it has worked good for me and what I want to do. It's just a bunch of yarn. And then I did already run out of the black really quickly, as you can imagine, since I border each one with black. And so I just have this black yarn. I'm actually going to have to buy some more of this soon. So this is what I use for my 2025. I try not to use this yarn for my other blanket because I am sure for 2025 I'm going to read a lot of books, and I just want to make sure that I have enough yarn for that. So the 4 books that I just finished actually are part of a video that I already posted, finishing all the books that I'm in the middle of. The first square I'm going to make for today is going to be just for the summer. So the first thing I do is I look at the cover, I see what colors stand out, and then I look for colors in my yarn bag that match the cover. Each square is 5 rows, but one of those rows are black. So there's potentially 4 different colors that you can have. Some of them only have 2 colors, some of them have 3 colors. It just depends. I don't think I've done any that only has 1 color though. I can pick up to 4 colors, and with a book like this, I'm definitely going to need all of those colors, I think. I'm immediately seeing like this pinkish red. There is yellow, a blue, and maybe orange. So I'm going to get all of those colors out first and see how I like them. I do also see some green, so I'm going to put some green aside just in case I decide to go with that color. So this book obviously has a lot of colors, which made it really hard to narrow down what colors I wanted to use. What I did is I just took out all of the colors that I could see going with the book, and then I narrowed it down to just 1 color from each color. I don't know if that makes sense. So like 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 blue. So I narrowed it down to these colors: yellow, then my blue, then my orange, then my pinkish red. I make my slip knot, which everyone does a little bit differently, but that's how I do mine. And then I chain 4, and then I just attach them together with a slip knot to make a little, not a slip knot, oh did I, yeah, a slip knot, to make a little circle. And then I will crochet inside of my circle. Here is what it looks like now. What do we think? Hello again. Yesterday I talked about mostly my 2025 book blanket, and I got to show you some of it. I did finish my Just for the Summer square. This is how it turned out. I really liked the colors. And then I made one for Just for Her Baby, and that's this square. And then one for Positively Penelope, and that's this square. I lined up all of my book squares that I've made so far and like put them together, and it looks really good so far. I thought maybe I won't put them in the exact order that I read them if there's like too much of one color on spot, But as of right now, what it looks like, I think it looks good, and I probably will keep it in that order. These squares are my favorite to make, and it's definitely different than working on this blanket, which I'm going to talk about this blanket more today, but they are just so fun to make. But with these squares, I am actually missing 4 different squares, which all 4 of those books are part of series. I've only read like the first 2 books of a series. Once I read a few more or whenever I maybe complete the series, then I'll look and see if I want to make each square individually, or if I want to make one big square or just one regular size square that represents the whole series. I do have a few pictures of me as I was making my book squares, so I might have like a little slideshow type video to show you. Now it is time to talk about my 2024 blanket. And this one is harder to do because it is quite huge right now, and it's going to be even bigger. So I made a book blanket chart, which I'll have on the screen. I have all of the books that I am still doing, and right now there are 33 books left, which is not a lot at all, especially when each book averages about 300 to 400 pages, so usually 3 to 4 rows. So I started working on this blanket, as I said, and once I noticed that it was getting pretty long and it was going to be a lot longer, I decided to start a whole nother blanket, and that's whenever I started working on this blanket. So I started working on this blanket. As I saw that it was getting close to being this size, I started measuring it, and once I saw that they were the same size, I decided to make my life a little bit easier. I'm actually going to calculate all the books that I have left in all the rows that I have left. So I'm going to lay these blankets out and show you what they look like so you can see how big they are. So I just took a picture of the blankets together because it was kind of hard to film them. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that they're even on both sides. Where the second half of the blanket matches the first half of the blanket, I started calculating how many rows I had left, and at that point it was 33 rows. So I did all 33 books, and then I said what colors I needed for each book and how many rows I needed for each book. So for instance, for the first book I needed 3 rows, for the second book 4 rows, for the third book 2 rows. And so altogether that was 128 rows. That is 64 rows each that I need to do for each blanket. And so far I've done 18 for this blanket. So that's why this blanket is a little bit bigger than this blanket. So now I'm going to show you my actual crochet process. So right now I am working on this half of the blanket. Just to make sure that they're evening up, I'm going to work on both blankets and make sure that they're measuring equally. And as long as they're both measuring equally, then this is the format that I'm going to use that is on my phone, on my notes app. So I am just going to be watching TV at this time as I work on this. Right now I'm doing A Court of Mist and Fury, which was one of my favorite books that I read in 2024. That book is 626 pages, and so that is 6 rows. I round to the nearest 10. 26 is lower than 50, and so because of that I just do 6 rows. I see some people who round up every single time. I'm glad I do not do that because that would be a lot of rows to do. I do try to mimic the colors the best I can. This book is like I don't really know, it's like a greenish blue, but like more green. The yarn that I have is actually more blue and it's kind of lighter than the book cover, but it's the closest that I had to the book cover, and so I do not buy new yarn every time. I don't have the exact color. I just use the best that I can with what I have. What I'm doing is I'm doing 2 rows of the mint color, and then I'm going to do 2 rows of yellow, and then 2 more rows of the mint color, and that makes 6 rows. I just finished those 6 rows of the mint color, yellow, and then the mint color again. So that represents one book, 600 pages of A Court of Mist and Fury. So that's kind of how I do it, and then I just keep working on it. After I finish a book, I mark on the bottom of my notes. I have how many rows I've done so far. So far I've done 18 rows, but I just did 6 more, so I add the +6, +6, and then I add the 6 to the 18. So 24. So far I've done 24 out of the 64 rows. At this point, I'm actually going to pause doing this blanket and go back to the other half of my blanket and start working on that one. For this blanket, I'm actually doing all of my books backwards, so the start of it's at the bottom, and as you can see, it has all of my Christmas books. Those were the first books that I did, which were the books that I did at the end of 2024. And so now we're working our way backwards, and we're almost to the middle. The other half of my blanket, I'm working from the beginning and working my way also into the middle. I'm going to tie this off because I don't want to lose it. And then I just tie it off just once so that I can easily undo it whenever I join the next color. And so I'm going to put this one aside and work on the other one. Now I'm working backwards on my list. So the first book is brown and pale yellow. I'm going to do the pale yellow first because I did just do a brown row. And so I just join with my new color, and then I just continue crocheting. I'll show you whenever I'm all caught up. And here is the final result. So I ended up doing 24 rows, so I'm actually still in the middle of one of the books. And I'm just going to keep doing this process, doing like 20-ish rows for each blanket and then putting them together to make sure they're measuring the same. And doing that until I reach the end. Then I'm going to border them both and then put them together. So all of that will happen in a different video once I am closer to being finished with this project. But I just really wanted to do a little update to have maybe some progress as I do this journey of making book blankets. I think it was a lot of fun to film. I hope maybe it encourages somebody else to do a book blanket or just to start new projects. I taught myself how to crochet, I think in 2020, and it was a lot of fun. I think it'd also be fun to maybe do a teaching crochet video on here. In this video I just kind of showed you what I was doing, but I didn't teach you how to do those things. If that's something that interests you, let me know so that I can maybe do a video like that in the future. But yeah, these are what the 2 blankets look like together. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already and like this video if you enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next video.